It was the middle of summer when Emma Jensen's life turned upside down. At 28, she had everything anyone could want: a high-paying job as a marketing executive, a modern apartment in the heart of Chicago, and a seemingly perfect social life. But on the morning she received the call, she realized that nothing in her life had ever felt as empty as it did in that moment. Emma had always been the go-getter. She had spent her entire adult life climbing the corporate ladder, working endless hours and doing everything she could to prove her worth to her boss, her family, and most importantly, herself. But the truth was, despite all of her success, Emma felt more like a robot than a person. She had no time for herself, no time for the things she loved, and worst of all, she had no time for people who truly mattered to her. The phone call came just as she was finishing a big project at work. It was from her older sister, Sarah, who lived in a small town in Kentucky. "Emma, it's Mom," Sarah said, her voice trembling. "She's gone." At first, Emma didn't understand. "What do you mean? Gone where?" she asked, even though the words felt like they were already sinking into her chest like lead. "She passed away this morning, Emma. We didn't expect it, but it happened so fast." Emma stood there in silence, the weight of her mother's death hitting her like a wave crashing over her. The sadness was immediate, but so was something else, a deep sense of guilt. She had been so wrapped up in her own world, so caught up in her career, that she hadn't been there for her mother during her final days. She hadn't even made the time to visit her as often as she should have. The funeral was held a few days later, but Emma couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. She didn't know how to mourn. She didn't know how to feel. She had spent so many years focusing on work and success that she had forgotten what it felt like to connect with people, to let herself feel anything at all. She barely recognized herself in the reflection of the woman standing at her mother's gravesite. Her mother's passing was the wake-up call Emma had been waiting for, though she hadn't realized it until then. For the first time in years, she found herself questioning everything. She thought about all the dreams she'd put on hold, the relationships she'd sacrificed, and the happiness she had convinced herself was unimportant in the pursuit of success. But now, staring down at her mother's grave, Emma realized that she had been chasing the wrong things. Her mother had always been different from her, calm, grounded, and content. She had never cared about climbing ladders or impressing people. All her mother had wanted was to live a simple, fulfilling life surrounded by the people she loved. And yet, Emma had spent all her years ignoring that truth. Now, with her mother gone, Emma felt more lost than ever. After the funeral, Emma took a week off from work. She couldn't focus on her job anymore, couldn't sit through another meeting, couldn't pretend that everything was fine. Instead, she took a trip to the small town where she grew up, a place she hadn't visited in years. It was quiet there, with rolling hills and the sound of crickets in the evening air. She stayed in the house she had grown up in, a place filled with memories of simpler times. For the first few days, Emma did nothing but walk around the old town, retracing the steps of her youth. She wandered by the old library, where she used to spend hours reading, and the ice cream shop where she and her friends would sit on the porch and talk for hours. She even found herself walking by the lake, where she and her mother used to sit together and watch the sunset. It was in those moments, sitting alone by the water, that Emma started to reconnect with the version of herself she had lost, the version of herself that had been happy with less, content with the present, and focused on the things that truly mattered. But the real change came when she visited her mother's old garden. It was overgrown now, with weeds choking the flowers that once thrived there. Emma pulled on her gloves and began to clear away the weeds, one by one. It wasn't long before she was lost in the rhythm of it. The dirt between her fingers, the soft breeze in her hair, the quiet hum of nature around her. For the first time in years, Emma felt a sense of peace. She felt like she was doing something that truly mattered, something that connected her to the past, to her mother, and to the part of herself she had almost forgotten. As she worked in the garden, Emma realized that she couldn't go back to her old life. She couldn't return to the never-ending cycle of meetings and deadlines, the pressure to always be more, do more, and achieve more. It wasn't just her mother's death that had opened her eyes. It was the realization that she had been living someone else's life, a life dictated by expectations, rather than passion or purpose. The decision wasn't easy. Emma had spent years building her career, making connections, and climbing the corporate ladder. But she knew, deep down, that if she didn't change now, she would never be truly happy. So, after much soul-searching, Emma made the bold decision to quit her job and leave the city behind. She didn't have a plan, didn't know what the future would hold, but she knew one thing for sure. She had to find her own path. It wasn't a smooth transition. Emma struggled with self-doubt, wondering if she was making the right choice, if she was being reckless, or if she was just running away from her responsibilities. But every time she found herself questioning her decision, she would think back to the garden, to the peace she had felt there, and to the woman she was becoming. As the months passed, Emma began to find her way. She started working with a local charity in her hometown, helping at-risk youth learn about gardening, sustainability, and self-sufficiency. She took up painting, something she had always dreamed of doing, but had never had the time for. She started hosting community events and connecting with people in ways she had never experienced before. For the first time, she felt like she was living authentically, doing work that felt meaningful and aligned with her values. And one evening, as she sat on the porch of her childhood home, watching the sun set over the hills, Emma realized something profound. Her mother had been right all along. The secret to happiness wasn't found in accolades, awards, or promotions. It was found in simple moments, in doing what you love, being surrounded by people who care about you, and living a life that feels true to yourself. Emma's story was one of loss, but it was also one of rebirth. She had found herself in the most unlikely of places, in the quiet corners of a small town, in the peace of a garden, and in the memories of a mother who had always known what truly mattered. And in the end, Emma understood that life was not about being the best or the busiest. It was about finding balance, pursuing purpose, and embracing the journey, no matter how unexpected or uncertain it might seem.